The moment I raise my hand in front of the entire hall, the temperature in the room drops so fast that ice starts crawling across the windows. 300 students freeze mid-breath. The chandeliers above us shatter, one by one, raining glass that never touches the floor because it's frozen in the air. And standing at the podium, the principal of Duskmere Academy for the Advanced Demonic Arts, a 900-year-old archdemon who has personally executed rebellions, takes one look at me and does something I have never seen him do in front of students. He steps back. Not a flinch, not a stumble, a full, deliberate step back, like something ancient and enormous just walked into the room wearing my face. And that's the exact moment every professor in that hall stops pretending they're in control of anything. 20 minutes earlier, none of this was supposed to happen. I was supposed to be invisible. That was the entire plan. Blend in, fail quietly, survive the semester. My name is Rowen Ashgrave, and if you'd asked anyone at this academy who I was 3 weeks ago, they wouldn't have known. That was on purpose. Duskmere doesn't accept humans. It barely tolerates half-bloods, and what I am isn't even supposed to exist on their registration forms. Because the moment they find out what's actually sleeping inside me, half of them will want me dead, and the other half will want to own me. So I did the smart thing. I suppressed it. Every single day, I wrapped my real aura in 7 layers of illusion magic I taught myself in secret, using a technique that shouldn't work on someone like me, and somehow it did, because apparently, even monsters get lucky sometimes. I ranked dead last in every combat class. I let first years shove past me in the hallway. I let the professors mark me as a waste of a seat. Being underestimated was the whole strategy. Nobody threatens a rat they think is harmless. But strategies die the second someone decides to humiliate you in public. His name is Draven Sable, heir to one of the 9 demon houses, and he has spent every day since I arrived treating me like a personal punching bag with a heartbeat. That morning, in front of the entire combat hall, he didn't just want to beat me, he wanted to break something in me that everyone could watch happen. "Let's see the scholarship rat bleed," he said, loud enough that the whole hall laughed with him. I should have stayed calm. I usually do. I have trained myself for years to swallow insults the way other people swallow water. Automatic, unthinking, no aftertaste. But something about the way he grinned right before he swung, like he already knew I wouldn't fight back, like my silence was something he was owed, cracked the one thing I'd kept locked for 3 weeks, the seal. And the moment it cracked, everything in that room remembered what real fear feels like. I need you to understand what I actually am, because none of this makes sense without it. I wasn't born human. I wasn't born demon either. 9 years ago, on the night the neighboring kingdom burned, something ancient and starving crossed into our world through a tear that was never supposed to open. And it didn't possess me, it merged with me. Whatever it was, it left half of itself behind in a 6-year-old kid who had no idea his own shadow had started breathing. For years I thought I was cursed. Turns out cursed was the polite word. What lives inside me is a fragment of something the demon world used to call the Hollow Sovereign, a being so old that even the archdemons who wrote the founding laws of Duskmere refused to say its name out loud in daylight. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this. And for 9 years, my entire life has been one long, exhausting negotiation to keep it asleep. That morning, Draven Sable woke it up. His fist never landed. I want to be clear about that, because for one full second, time in that hall genuinely stopped making sense. His hand was an inch from my face, and then it just wasn't moving anymore, like the air itself had turned into stone around his knuckles. I hadn't cast anything. I hadn't even raised my hands. The pressure just poured out of me, unfiltered, unplanned, and unstoppable. The way water pours out of a dam that's been cracking quietly for years and finally gives. Every torch in the hall bent sideways like it was trying to flee. Every student within 30 feet dropped to their knees, not from a spell, but from the sheer weight of standing too close to something their bodies recognized as a predator, even if their minds didn't understand why. And Draven? Arrogant, untouchable, House Heir Draven. went pale in a way I'd never seen a demon go pale, because demons don't usually feel real fear, they perform threat. What crossed his face wasn't performance. It was the look of something small realizing, far too late, that it had just poked a sleeping god. "What?" he whispered. "Are you?" I didn't answer, partly because I didn't know how to explain it in a sentence, and partly because I was too busy trying to shove the pressure back down before it did something worse than break furniture. That should have been the end of it. A weird, terrifying moment, quietly buried, students told to keep their mouths shut, life going back to boring and invisible. It wasn't. Because somewhere in that room, a professor had already sent an emergency signal straight to the principal's office, and within 90 seconds, the doors at the far end of the hall exploded open. I want you to picture the single most powerful being most of these students have ever stood in the same building with. Headmaster Vaelric Duskmere himself, founder's bloodline, 900 years old. A war veteran who once single-handedly held a border against an invasion for 6 days without sleeping. He doesn't attend disciplinary hearings. He doesn't personally respond to fights between first years. His presence alone was proof that whatever the professors had reported wasn't a fight. It was a threat assessment. He walked in slow, deliberate, radiating the kind of calm that older demons use specifically to make younger ones panic. His eyes swept the shattered chandeliers, the bent torches, the students still frozen on their knees, and then landed on me. And here's the part that still doesn't feel real when I think back on it. He stopped walking. Not out of respect, out of caution. 900 years of surviving wars, betrayals, and worse than either. And the first genuine flicker of caution I'd seen from him in 3 weeks of watching him casually terrify freshmen happened the moment his eyes met mine. "Rowen Ashgrave," he said slowly, like he was double-checking a name against a memory he didn't like. "Scholarship student. Bottom of the combat rankings?" "That's me," I said, because lying felt pointless with my aura still leaking through my collapsing seal like smoke through a cracked window. He didn't respond right away. He was staring past my face, at something behind my eyes that only someone truly ancient could see. Then, quiet enough that only the front row could hear it, he said 4 words that turned the entire hall into a held breath. "That is not possible." Professors started whispering behind him. I caught fragments. Sealed bloodline, forbidden registry, the old wars. Words that meant nothing to a normal student, and everything to anyone who'd read the deep archive restricted to faculty only. One of the combat instructors actually took a step backward, the same way Draven had, like proximity itself was dangerous now. And that's when I realized something that scared me more than any of this. They weren't looking at me like I was a threat to be handled. They were looking at me like I was a mistake that had been buried on purpose, a long time ago, by people who thought they'd buried it deep enough. Let me back up, because you need the full picture before this gets worse. And trust me, it gets so much worse. 3 weeks ago, I arrived at Duskmere with one goal: survive long enough to find out why the Hollow Sovereign fragment chose me, and hopefully find a way to remove it before it either kills me or turns me into something I don't recognize. The Academy accepted a small number of human scholarship students every generation, mostly for political appearances, mostly treated like decoration nobody expected to graduate. I used that low expectation as camouflage. Fail the physical evaluations on purpose. Underperform in every class that involved raw output. Let the SEALs do their job and stay quiet. It worked, right up until Draven decided quiet meant weak. I'd tried to avoid him from day one. He runs with a group of upperclassmen from the 9 houses, who treat first years like entertainment. And out of every human or half-blood scholarship student on campus, he'd fixated on me specifically, for reasons I didn't understand until much later. At the time, I assumed it was random cruelty. It wasn't. He could sense something. Not consciously. Demons from old bloodlines have instincts buried deep in their blood. Warning systems passed down from ancestors who survived the last war against things like what's sleeping inside me. Draven's instincts had been screaming at him for weeks that I was wrong, dangerous, other. And instead of listening to that instinct like a sane person, he did what arrogant heirs always do. He tried to prove the instinct wrong by attacking the thing that scared him. Big mistake. Back in the hall, Headmaster Duskmere raised one hand, and the pressure in the room shifted, like he was trying to physically hold the situation together before it collapsed into something no one could contain. "Everyone except faculty and the 2 students involved," he said, voice booming without him raising it. "Leave immediately." Nobody argued. 300 students evacuated that hall faster than I'd ever seen a crowd move, tripping over each other, refusing to look back, and I don't blame them. If I could have run from myself in that moment, I would have. Draven didn't move. Partly pride, partly the fact that his legs were apparently not fully cooperating yet. Once the hall cleared, Duskmere approached slowly, hands clasped behind his back, studying me the way you'd study a bomb you weren't sure was diffused or armed. "Do you know what you are, boy?" "I have a general idea," I said carefully. "I don't think you and I have the same idea, though." Something that might have been the ghost of a smile crossed his face, gone almost instantly. "The seal on you is old craftsmanship, older than anything a scholarship student should have access to. Who taught you to bind a sovereign fragment?" That question hit different than I expected, because I never told anyone I was sealing anything. I'd assumed, this whole time, that my illusion technique was hiding the truth entirely, that nobody could tell there was a fragment underneath. Instead, apparently, every experienced demon in that hall had recognized exactly what kind of power was leaking out the second the crack widened. "I taught myself," I said, which was true, mostly. Duskmere studied me another long moment, then turned to the professors gathering nervously near the far wall. "Lock down the eastern wing. No student enters or leaves until I say otherwise. And someone contact the council." That last line made every professor in the room visibly pale. The council wasn't academy business. The council was the highest demon authority on the continent, the body that decided things like wars, treaties, and executions. If they were being contacted over a school fight, this had already stopped being about me humiliating Draven Sable in front of his friends. This was about something the demon world had apparently spent generations trying to keep buried, and I had just kicked the dirt off the grave in front of 300 witnesses. Draven finally found his voice again, though it came out shakier than his usual arrogant drawl. "Headmaster, with respect, he attacked a house heir. Shouldn't he be—" "He didn't attack anyone," Duskmere cut in, not even looking at him. "He defended himself, and in doing so, revealed something this academy has spent years pretending not to notice." He turned back to me. "You've been suppressing this the entire time you've been here." It wasn't a question. I answered anyway. "Every day, all day. It takes everything I have. And today the suppression failed because he provoked you." "Today the suppression failed," I said, "because he tried to hit me while I wasn't paying attention to holding it together." Duskmere exhaled slowly, an old, tired sound that didn't fit the image of a 900-year-old war hero at all. "Do you understand what happens now?" I didn't, and the way he said it made it very clear I wasn't going to like the answer. "The council doesn't handle things quietly," he said. "The moment they hear a suppressed sovereign fragment surfaced inside these walls, they will send an Inquisitor, possibly more than one. And Inquisitors do not care about context, do not care about provocation, and do not care whether you're a frightened 17-year-old boy who never asked for any of this. What do they care about?" "Containment," he said simply, "or elimination, whichever is faster." The words landed like a second explosion, quieter than the first, but far more dangerous. For 3 weeks, my biggest fear had been getting expelled for underperforming, or getting cornered by Draven's crew in an empty hallway. Now I was being told that within days, possibly hours, an official demon enforcer was going to arrive at this academy with orders that might end with me not walking out of it. I should have panicked. Some part of me wanted to, but something else, something old and patient underneath my ribs, felt strangely, disturbingly calm about the whole thing. like it had been waiting 9 years for exactly this kind of attention. That should have terrified me more than it did. Draven, to his credit, or maybe just his self-preservation instinct, had gone very quiet, watching this conversation with the expression of someone realizing he'd bullied the wrong sleeping monster in the wrong century. "There's a way to slow this down," Duskmere said finally. "But it requires you to trust me, and it requires you to be honest about exactly what's inside you, right now. No half-truths." I looked at him, at the professors watching from the shadows like they weren't sure whether to be afraid of me or of what was coming for me, and I made a decision I'd spent 9 years avoiding. "Fine," I said. "Ask. What does it call itself?" The temperature in the hall dropped again, just slightly, just enough that everyone noticed, because the answer came not from my mouth, but from something underneath it. A second voice layered beneath my own, low and ancient and amused. "It doesn't need to call itself anything," the voice said, using my throat like a borrowed instrument. "It already knows exactly who's listening." Every professor in that hall took a full step back. Duskmere didn't. He just looked, for the first time since I'd met him, genuinely unsettled. "That voice," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I haven't heard in 300 years. And that's when I understood this wasn't just about me being dangerous. This was about the fragment inside me being someone Duskmere already had history with, a long time before I was even born. And whatever that history was, it clearly hadn't ended well the first time." He straightened, composing himself with the kind of practiced control only centuries of survival can teach a person. "We don't have long. If the Council's Inquisitor arrives before we've stabilized your seal properly, there will be no negotiation. I need you to come with me. Now. And if I say no, then Draven Sable becomes the least of your problems," he said, "because everyone in this room just watched a sealed sovereign fragment surface in a school hallway, and half of them are already deciding who to tell first." He wasn't wrong. I could already see it in the professors' faces, the calculations, the whispered names of contacts, the political value of being the one who reported first. Rumors like this didn't stay contained, not here. I nodded once and followed him out of the hall, leaving Draven standing alone in the wreckage of his own arrogance, staring at the space where I'd been like he still couldn't quite believe what he'd provoked. The walk to the Headmaster's tower took longer than it should have, because Duskmere kept slowing his pace, glancing sideways at me like he was reading something written just beneath my skin. Halfway up the spiraling stone staircase, he finally spoke again. 9 years ago, he said, a tear opened over the border kingdoms. We assumed the fragment that escaped through it had dissolved, scattered into nothing, harmless. The council closed the file. It didn't dissolve, I said. It found me. Clearly. He paused at a landing, studying the ancient runes carved into the tower wall, like he was checking whether they still held. Do you know why a fragment of the Hollow Sovereign would choose a human child, out of every living creature it could have merged with? I've had 9 years to wonder. I still don't know. I have a theory, he said, and you are not going to like it. Before I could ask, a resonant chime rippled through the entire tower, deep and mechanical, the kind of sound that clearly meant something specific to everyone who worked here, because every professor within earshot went rigid at once. That's the outer ward alarm, Duskmere said, and for the first time since I'd met him, something that looked genuinely close to alarm crossed his ancient face. That means the Inquisitor is already here. Already? You said days, maybe hours. I said hours if the council followed protocol. He was already moving, faster now, pulling me along the corridor toward the tower's outer balcony. This means someone alerted them before the incident even happened. That detail landed like a second gut punch. Someone had known, in advance, that today was the day my seal would crack. Someone had tipped off the council before Draven ever threw that punch. Who would do that? I asked. Duskmere's jaw tightened. Someone who wanted you exposed, not protected. We reached the balcony just as the sky above the academy split open with a controlled tear of golden light, and out of it stepped a figure in black and silver armor that seemed to drink the light around it rather than reflect it. Wings folded tight, expression carved from something colder than stone. "Vaelric Duskmere," the Inquisitor said, voice flat and formal, the kind of voice that had delivered death sentences before and would again. "Where is the anomaly?" Duskmere stepped slightly in front of me, not enough to be obvious, but enough that I understood exactly what he was doing. "There is no anomaly here," he said. "Only a student." The Inquisitor's eyes shifted past him, landing directly on me, and something behind that cold, armored expression flickered, just for a second, like recognition. "That," the Inquisitor said slowly, "is not what my orders describe." And that's when I realized this wasn't a routine containment sweep. This Inquisitor already knew exactly who I was, exactly what was sleeping inside me, and exactly why the Council wanted me found. Which meant somebody, somewhere, had been tracking me long before that hall exploded, long before Draven ever threw a punch he shouldn't have thrown. I hadn't just woken up a sleeping monster in front of 300 witnesses. I'd walked straight into a trap that had been waiting 9 years to close. The Inquisitor's wings unfurled fully, and the golden light around the tear behind him dimmed, replaced by a colder, harsher glow that pulsed in rhythm with the runes stitched across his armor. "Step aside, Headmaster. This does not require your involvement." "He is a student under my protection," Duskmere said, and for the first time, I heard something in his voice that wasn't calm authority. It was warning. "You will not touch him without due process." "Due process," the Inquisitor repeated, almost amused, "was decided the moment the Council confirmed a sovereign fragment surfaced within these walls. There is no hearing for this. There is only containment." My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I'd spent 9 years terrified of exactly this moment, the moment someone with real power looked at me and saw a problem to be solved instead of a person to be understood. And now here it was, standing in front of me in black armor, radiating the kind of authority that didn't negotiate. "I didn't ask for this," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. "I didn't ask to be born with this thing inside me. I've spent every single day trying to keep it contained so nobody would get hurt." "Intentions are irrelevant," the Inquisitor said. "Outcomes are not. 300 students witnessed an uncontrolled surge today. Tomorrow, it may be 3,000. The Council does not wait for tragedies to justify prevention." He raised one hand, and the runes on his armor flared brighter, forming a containment sigil in the air between us, spinning slow and deliberate, the kind of spell that wasn't meant to hurt me. It was meant to erase me, or at least erase whatever version of me existed once the fragment was extracted. And that's when the second voice, the one buried under my own, spoke again. Quiet this time, almost gentle. "He's going to try to rip me out of you," it said. "You should know that will very likely kill you first." Great, just great. 9 years of secrecy, and my death was going to be a footnote in someone else's containment report. "There has to be another option," I said, to Duskmere, to the Inquisitor, to anyone who might actually be listening, instead of just executing orders. "There is," the Inquisitor said, "but it isn't mine to offer. My orders are containment. If containment is not possible without termination, termination is authorized." Behind me, I heard Duskmere's breath catch, just slightly, the closest thing to genuine fear I'd seen from a 900-year-old war veteran since this entire nightmare started an hour ago. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," Duskmere said quietly. "I fought alongside the last person who tried to contain a hollow sovereign fragment by force. He didn't survive the attempt. Neither did the fragment. Neither, frankly, did the city they were standing in." The Inquisitor's expression didn't change, but his hand paused, just for a second, hovering over the spinning sigil. "Are you suggesting I abandon my orders based on a 300-year-old cautionary tale?" "I'm suggesting," Duskmere said, "that you consider whether the boy in front of you has spent 9 years learning to control something you clearly don't fully understand, and whether ripping it out of him by force is more likely to save this academy or level it. That gave the Inquisitor pause, but only a small one. He was still a soldier following a chain of command that didn't care about nuance. The Council's assessment stands: containment or elimination. Then let me offer a third option, Duskmere said, stepping fully between us now. One within my authority as headmaster of this academy. A probationary seal, monitored directly by faculty, with monthly council review. If the fragment shows any sign of destabilizing beyond what the boy can control, I will personally contact the council and hand him over without resistance. You would stake your reputation on a student you've known for 3 weeks? I would stake my reputation, Duskmere said, on 900 years of judgment telling me that boy is not the threat your orders assume he is. He is the opposite. He has spent 9 years containing something most trained mages couldn't survive containing for 9 days. The silence that followed felt like it lasted an hour, though it was probably only seconds. The Inquisitor studied me, the spinning containment sigil still hovering between us, waiting for a word that would either dismiss it or unleash it. And then, from somewhere behind us, near the tower stairwell, a new voice cut through the tension, cold and satisfied in a way that made my stomach drop before I even turned around. Don't listen to the headmaster, the voice said. He's protecting a monster because he's too soft to admit he made a mistake letting it into this academy in the first place. I turned, and standing at the top of the stairwell, arms crossed, wearing the smug expression of someone who believed they just won something, was Draven Sable. So he was the one who tipped off the council. Of course he was. You reported me, I said, and it wasn't really a question, more a confirmation of exactly how deep his cruelty went. Before the fight even happened. I reported a threat, Draven said, unbothered by the accusation, because my family has connections with the council, and my instincts have been screaming about you since the day you arrived. Turns out I was right. Turns out I was right about everything. You could have gotten every student in that hall killed, I said, just to prove a point. I proved a point, Draven said. I proved you're not the harmless scholarship rat you pretended to be. And now the council is going to do what this academy was too weak to do themselves. He looked at the Inquisitor with something close to pride. Contain it, or better, remove it entirely. The Inquisitor's gaze shifted between us, weighing something, and I realized with a sinking feeling that Draven's testimony, delivered with the confidence of a house heir who genuinely believed he was doing the right thing, was carrying more weight than I wanted it to. The witness account confirms uncontrolled hostility, the Inquisitor said slowly, triggered without external provocation. That's not true, I said, sharper than I meant to. He attacked me first. He's been attacking me for 3 weeks. Prove it, Draven said, smug, certain nobody would take my word over a house heir's. And that's when something inside me, something that had been quietly listening this entire time, decided it was done being patient. The second voice, the one layered beneath mine, didn't ask permission this time. Would you like proof? It said, using my mouth, my voice twisted into something ancient and amused. Or would you like to watch what happens when I stop holding myself back? The pressure that poured out of me this time wasn't an accidental crack in a failing seal. It was deliberate, controlled, a demonstration, not a disaster, and somehow that made it more terrifying, because everyone in that tower understood immediately that the wild surge in the combat hall hadn't been me losing control, it had been me barely holding on. This was what happened when I stopped trying. The stone beneath our feet didn't crack this time. It simply stopped existing wherever the pressure touched it, replaced by a smooth, glassy black surface that pulsed faintly like something breathing underneath. The containment sigil the Inquisitor had summoned flickered, strained, and then, impossibly, folded in on itself and disappeared, unraveled by a force it was never designed to withstand. Draven's smug expression collapsed into something closer to horror. The Inquisitor took a full step back, wings flaring instinctively, hand already reaching for a weapon he hadn't needed until this exact second. That's not possible, he said, echoing Duskmere's earlier words almost exactly. A fragment cannot unravel a council-grade containment sigil, not without a sovereign's full power behind it. Then maybe, the second voice said through my mouth, calm, almost bored, your council should update its assumptions about what a fragment is capable of before it sends soldiers to contain things it clearly doesn't understand. I felt myself losing the thread of control, the pressure inside me pushing harder against the walls I'd spent 9 years building, and for one horrifying second, I genuinely didn't know if I was going to be able to pull it back. Then Duskmir's hand landed on my shoulder, firm and steady, grounding me the way nothing else in that tower could. "Rowen," he said quietly, "just for me. You are still in control. Prove it. Pull it back." I don't know why his voice reached me when nothing else could have. Maybe because it was the first time since arriving at Duskmir that someone had spoken to me like I was a person capable of choosing, instead of a threat waiting to happen. I focused everything I had left on that one idea. I am still in control. And slowly, painfully, I pulled the pressure back inside myself, sealing it away layer by layer, until the glassy black stone beneath our feet faded back into ordinary tower floor, and the wind stopped howling through the open balcony. The Inquisitor stared at me for a long, tense moment, weapon still half drawn, calculating something I couldn't read. "You pulled it back," he said finally, quiet, almost reluctant. "On your own, without external suppression." "I've been doing that every day for 9 years, I said, exhausted in a way that went far deeper than physical tiredness. This wasn't new. This was just the first time anyone actually saw it. The Inquisitor lowered his weapon, slow, deliberate, though he didn't fully relax. That level of self-restraint over an unstable fragment is... He paused, searching for a word, and settled on one that surprised me. Unprecedented. "Then update your report," Duskmir said, seizing the opening immediately. "Note the successful voluntary suppression. Note that the boy in front of you demonstrated more control in 60 seconds than most trained mages manage in a lifetime. And note that the incident in the combat hall was provoked by unprovoked physical assault from another student." Draven opened his mouth to argue, but the Inquisitor's cold glance silenced him faster than any threat could have. "The report will reflect what I witnessed," the Inquisitor said, "which was restraint, not aggression." He turned back to me, studying me with something that had shifted, just slightly, from suspicion toward something closer to careful reassessment. "The Council will still require monthly monitoring. Any further incident, regardless of provocation, and this probationary allowance ends. Am I understood?" "Understood," I said, relief flooding through me so fast it made me lightheaded. "One more thing," the Inquisitor said, and something in his tone shifted again, quieter now, almost private. "The voice that spoke through you, I recognize something in its cadence. That is not standard behavior for a mindless fragment." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. "What do you mean?" "Fragments of the Hollow Sovereign are not supposed to retain personality," he said slowly. "They are echoes, instinct without identity. What just spoke through you had opinions, preferences. That is not an echo, boy. That is something closer to a full consciousness, compressed into a shard small enough to hide inside a human child." Duskmir's expression darkened at that, like a suspicion he'd been quietly holding had just been confirmed. "Which means the Council's original assessment 9 years ago was wrong," he said. "This was never a scattered, dissolving fragment. This was a deliberate seed." "Planted by who?" I asked, though some part of me already dreaded the answer. Nobody answered immediately. The Inquisitor's wings folded slowly, the golden tear behind him beginning to shrink. His business here apparently concluded for now, but the question hung in the air like smoke that refused to clear. "That," Duskmir said finally, quiet and grim, "is what we need to find out, before whoever planted it decides it's time to collect." The Inquisitor stepped back toward the shrinking tear, pausing once more before he vanished into it entirely. "I will return in 1 month, Headmaster. I suggest you use that time wisely. If what I suspect is true, The council will not be the last power interested in that boy. His eyes found mine one final time, something unreadable flickering behind the cold armor. Whoever planted a seed like that inside a human child 9 years ago did not do it by accident. Someone wanted this. Someone is still waiting for it. And then the tear sealed shut behind him, leaving the tower in a silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat hammering against my ribs. Draven, finally finding his voice again, took a shaky step backward toward the stairwell. "This isn't over," he muttered, though the confidence from earlier had drained completely out of his voice. "The House Council will hear about this." "Let them," Duskmere said, not even bothering to look at him. "Tell them exactly what you saw. Tell them a scholarship student contained a council-grade sovereign fragment with nothing but 9 years of self-discipline, while a house heir threw the first punch and then lied about it to save face. I'm certain that story will reflect wonderfully on your family." Draven's face went through several shades of humiliated before he turned and fled down the stairwell without another word. For a long moment, it was just me, Duskmere, and the wind moving through the open balcony where a council inquisitor had nearly ended my life 20 minutes earlier. "You lied to him," I said quietly, "about the probationary seal being enough to guarantee my control." "I didn't lie," Duskmere said. "I made a calculated bet based on what I witnessed just now. You held it back. On your own. That tells me more about what you are than 9 years of council files ever could." "And if I hadn't been able to hold it back?" "Then we would be having a very different conversation right now," he said. "Or possibly no conversation at all." He turned to face me fully, expression unreadable, ancient eyes studying me like a puzzle he'd only just started solving. "Rowen, what that Inquisitor said about the fragment being a deliberate seed rather than an accident, I believe him. And if he's right, then someone planted a piece of the hollow sovereign inside a human child 9 years ago, on purpose, and has been waiting patiently ever since for it to grow into something usable." "Usable for what?" "That," Duskmere said, "is the question that should terrify you far more than anything that happened in that hall today." I stood there on that balcony, wind pulling at my uniform, the city stretching out below the academy walls, and felt something cold settle into my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. For 9 years, I'd believed I was a victim of bad luck, an accident that happened to be standing in the wrong place when a tear opened over a burning kingdom. Now I was being told I might have been chosen, cultivated, a weapon someone had planted inside a child and left to grow, patiently, quietly, for 9 years, waiting for exactly the right moment to come collect what they'd sown. And whoever they were still out there, still watching, still waiting. "There's something else," Duskmere said, voice lowering further, glancing toward the stairwell like he wanted to be certain we were truly alone before he continued. "The technique you used to seal yourself for 3 weeks, the one you claim you taught yourself." "I did teach myself." "I believe that you believe that," he said carefully. "But I recognized the structure of that seal the moment I saw it crack in the combat hall. It's not a technique that exists in any curriculum, any textbook, any archive I have access to, and I have access to nearly everything at this academy." He paused. "It's a technique I've only ever seen once before, 300 years ago, used by someone I fought beside during the war that nearly ended the demon world entirely." My mouth went dry. "Who?" "A mage who vanished decades before you were born," Duskmere said. "Presumed dead, whose research into binding ancient entities was considered so dangerous the council ordered every copy of it destroyed after the war ended. Then how would I know a technique that's supposed to be destroyed?" Duskmere's expression turned grave, the kind of grave that made my stomach twist before he even finished the sentence. "That," he said, "is what worries me most. Because if you learned that seal without ever being taught it, Rowen, that means one of two things. Either the fragment inside you retained enough of its original host's knowledge to teach you instinctively." He paused, letting the weight of the next possibility settle fully before he spoke it aloud. Or someone has been guiding you your entire life without you ever realizing it, preparing you for a moment that hasn't happened yet. The wind picked up around us, cold and sharp, and somewhere far below, the academy bells rang out the end of the school day, oblivious to the fact that everything about my life had just been rewritten in the span of a single afternoon. 3 weeks ago, I arrived at Duskmere trying to disappear. Now the council knew my name. A house heir wanted me destroyed. An ancient consciousness lived inside my chest with opinions of its own. And somewhere out there, someone who'd spent 9 years planting and cultivating me like a weapon was still watching, still waiting, for whatever moment they'd been preparing me for all along. I had no idea what that moment was, but I had a feeling I was about to find out far sooner than I wanted to. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the containment sigil unraveling, felt the pressure pouring out of me like water through a dam that had finally given up pretending it could hold. Heard that second voice speaking through my own mouth with an ease that told me it had been waiting 9 years for permission I never gave it. I lay in the dark of my dormitory, staring at the ceiling, and finally asked the question I'd been too afraid to ask since the day I first felt it stir inside me. Why me? I whispered into the empty room. Out of everyone in that burning kingdom, why did you choose me? I didn't expect an answer. For 9 years, the fragment had mostly stayed silent, a pressure, an instinct, a low hum beneath my thoughts that occasionally surfaced in dreams I could never quite remember. It had never spoken back before today, but tonight, quiet and almost thoughtful, it did. I didn't choose you, it said. I was placed inside you. My whole body went cold. Placed? By who? That, it said, is a memory I don't have access to either. Whoever sealed me away first made certain of that. A pause. Long enough that I thought it had gone silent again. Then quieter, almost gentle in a way I hadn't expected from something so ancient and dangerous, it added. But I can tell you this much. Whoever planted me inside you did not do it to hurt you. If they wanted a weapon, they would have made me stronger, faster, louder. Instead, they made me patient. They made me wait 9 years for you to grow strong enough to survive carrying me. That isn't cruelty, Rowen. That's protection. Protection from what? From whatever is coming, it said, that they were too afraid to face without you. That answer didn't comfort me. If anything, it made the cold feeling in my chest worse, because it meant every quiet, ordinary year of my childhood, every moment I thought I was simply unlucky, had actually been part of a plan someone put into motion 9 years ago, a plan I still didn't understand, built around a threat I couldn't even name. I didn't get any more answers that night. The fragment went quiet again, retreating back into whatever part of me it lived in, leaving me alone with 1,000 new questions and not a single new answer. The next morning, word had already spread through the entire academy, faster than any official announcement could have managed. By the time I reached the dining hall, conversations stopped the second I walked through the doors. 300 pairs of eyes tracking me with a mixture of fear, fascination, and something that looked uncomfortably close to reverence. The scholarship rat who ranked dead last in every combat class had, in the span of one afternoon, become the single most talked about student at Duskmere Academy for the advanced demonic arts. Draven was nowhere in sight. I later found out his family had pulled him from classes for the week, officially for a private house matter, unofficially, according to whispers in the hallway, because facing a hall full of students who'd watched him get humiliated by the harmless scholarship rat was more than his pride could currently handle. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I mostly just felt exhausted and unsettlingly exposed, like I'd spent 3 weeks building a careful, quiet life out of camouflage, only to have it stripped away in a single violent afternoon, leaving nothing between me and every dangerous eye on this campus. Duskmere found me at lunch, sliding into the seat across from me, with none of the ceremony I'd have expected from a 900-year-old headmaster choosing to eat lunch with a scholarship student. The council has agreed to the probationary terms, he said without preamble. Monthly review, as discussed. You're not free of them, but you're not their prisoner either. For now. For now, I repeated. That's reassuring. It should be, he said, not unkindly. Most students in your position wouldn't have gotten that concession at all. He studied me for a moment, something calculating behind his ancient eyes. I've also been thinking about what the Inquisitor said, about the possibility that someone planted the fragment in you deliberately, and about the seal technique you shouldn't know. And I think it's time you learn to actually use what's inside you, he said, instead of only learning to suppress it. Because whoever is out there waiting for you to grow into whatever they intended, Rowen, they are not going to wait forever, and when they come, hiding is not going to be an option anymore. I sat with that for a long moment, watching the dining hall around us slowly return to its normal noise and chaos. 300 students trying very hard to pretend they weren't still stealing glances in my direction every few seconds. 3 weeks ago, my only goal was to disappear. Now the headmaster of the most dangerous academy on the continent was offering to train me in a power that had already terrified an Inquisitor sent by the highest authority in the demon world. A power planted inside me 9 years ago by someone who was still out there, still watching, still waiting for the moment I finally became whatever they'd always intended. Fine, I said finally. Teach me. Something that might have been approval, or might have been relief, crossed Duskmir's ancient face. Good, because you're going to need every bit of control you can master. He leaned forward slightly, voice dropping low enough that only I could hear it. The Inquisitor mentioned something else before he left, something I didn't share in front of Draven Sable. The Council has records of 2 other sealed fragments from that same tear 9 years ago, fragments that were never accounted for. My stomach dropped. Meaning what? Meaning, Duskmir said grimly, you may not be the only one out there carrying a piece of something ancient and patient, waiting for the day it wakes up. He glanced toward the dining hall windows, toward the city stretching out beyond the academy walls, vast and full of strangers who had no idea what was quietly growing among them. And if the people who planted you are still watching, Rowen, I promise you this, they are watching those other 2 fragments just as closely. I looked down at my hands, steady now, no longer shaking the way they had been 24 hours ago in that combat hall, and felt the fragment inside me stir faintly, almost like it was listening, almost like it already knew exactly what was coming next. Somewhere out there, 2 more pieces of whatever slept inside me were waking up too, and whoever had planted all 3 of us, 9 years ago, patient and quiet and unseen, was about to find out that the weapons they'd been growing in secret had finally started asking questions of their own. That night, I stood alone on the same balcony where an Inquisitor had nearly ended my life less than a day earlier, looking out over a city full of people who had no idea how close they'd come to watching it burn. The fragment inside me was quiet again, but not sleeping, not the way it used to sleep before yesterday. I could feel it there now, awake, aware, waiting, the same way I imagined the other 2 fragments were waking up somewhere far beyond these walls, in bodies that had no idea their entire lives had been leading toward this exact moment. I thought about Draven's face when the sigil unraveled. I thought about the Inquisitor's warning, quiet and final, about someone still out there who wanted this. I thought about Duskmir's grim promise to teach me control instead of suppression, and about how badly I was going to need every ounce of it before whoever planted me 9 years ago finally decided it was time to collect what they'd grown. For 9 years, I'd told myself I was cursed, a mistake, an accident that happened to be standing in the wrong place on the worst night of my life. Standing on that balcony, feeling the fragment hum quietly beneath my ribs, like something finally awake and listening, I understood, for the first time, that I had never been an accident at all. I was a seed someone had planted on purpose. And somewhere out there, the ones who planted me were about to find out exactly what they'd grown.